You have to forgive me. I'm not used to holding a mic, so it'll take a little bit of a learning curve. So today, obviously, talking about warriors, not winners, and people always say, well, what are you talking about? The big premise of this talk is to dispel the myth of the toxic youth sport culture, but the win-at-all-costs mentality, and show that there is a way to win in youth sports, to create champions, but it's through this warrior mentality. And before I start, caveat, when I talk about warrior, I stumbled across the concept of a warrior athlete, in the 1990s when I was an athlete, and I was in high school, and I was struggling with my own growth and development and my own typical, high school hormone issues that you have, the mental issues of the game, trying to adapt to the game and get as great as I can, but stick to the values that my family had taught me. And I read a book by Dan Millman called The Way of the Warrior Athlete, I believe is what it's called, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And that's what introduced me. And then what I discovered was that in Chinese language, there is no word for champion. They use the symbol for a warrior. And so that sort of has solidified over the years that this is the best way to, and kids love being called little warriors, right? So this is the best way to describe what the mentality that we're going to talk about is. So I'm going to jump right in, and what I want to do is I want to juxtapose what a warrior is compared to a winner and what we see in youth sports these days. A very different view of what it was when we played. When we played youth sports, show of hands, who played for college scholarships? Who played to go pro? Who, even while you had that long-term goal, knew that you were getting something more out of youth sports than the scholarship or the go pro, right? I mean, when people asked me when I was a kid, I was a soccer player, and they said, what do you want to do? I want to be a pro soccer player. I want to go to Europe, right? But I knew that the chances were slim for me. Who in here has played pro hockey or played a pro sport? You usually get one. I did a TEDx talk one time in front of 1,500 people, and I knew I wasn't going to get a single hand in the audience, except Anthony Munoz was one of the other speakers that day. And of course, he raised his hand on me. The thing is none of us go pro. It's like less than 1% that actually go pro. But we got something more out of youth sports. We got these great values that we live by. We've got these awesome life skills. We were put in front of these mentors who cultivated us and grew us into these excellent people who succeeded beyond the game. And then we get to do the things like I'm doing today. I am here today because of youth sports, even though it never took me the route of scholarships and pro. And yet what are we doing now? We're recruiting kids at like 7th and 8th grade to play college sports. And our parents are in this mindset that the fear of missing out, that they invest so much money in youth sports for their kids because, it's okay, it'll pay off when Susie gets a scholarship. It'll all come back, right? That's the mindset. And we'll talk a little bit about that later tonight when I talk about a child-centered youth sport experience. But that mindset has created this win-at-all-costs winner's mentality. And so what I want to do today is I want to juxtapose this winner mentality driven by the trophies or what's at the end with this warrior mentality, and nod if you know what that represents. Good, because after we talk about warriors and winners and define what it means to be a warrior athlete, I'm going to show you the greatest warrior culture ever to play a sport on the face of the earth. So what does it mean to be a warrior, not a winner? It's a values-led and purpose-driven culture. I'm going to show you how it's values-led and purpose-driven. I'm going to show you how it's different from being winners by going through 5 psychological constructs. And I'm going to juxtapose the different personalities of these athletes under these constructs. And the first one, motivation. What does it look like to be a winner athlete? Typically, they're extrinsically motivated. They're outcome-oriented. They think about trophies mattering. They have this external voice. It's that athlete who's driven to do what they're doing because mom and dad are driving them there and making them, or because they want to get the scholarship, or because they want to win the trophy. Everything is driven by this voice speaking to them and telling them this is what they need to do. And they're selfish. How many of y'all have seen those pro athletes who maybe jump from team to team because they want that championship, they want their legacy, versus thinking about the sake of the team around them and the culture that they're building together? What does a warrior athlete look like? They're intrinsically motivated. They're process-oriented. Outcomes happen, but they care more about what they're doing in the process than they do about the outcome. We always tell our athletes, look, it's not what you get when you arrive, it's who you become along the way that matters. If they're focused on this process, then when they arrive, they'll get a great gift, and that is everything that they've built along the way. They may win, but more importantly, they'll win beyond the game. Purpose matters to these kinds of athletes. If you talk to a Warrior athlete, and let's use the Golden State Warriors because they just won another NBA championship, and if you talk to a lot of those guys, there's a lot of talk about process and purpose. We're here for a reason. We're here for a greater good. We're here for each other. That's what they talk about. And they talk about celebrating each other's successes. They're just as happy to see Kevin Durant win MVP at the NBA Finals as they are to be the guy that hits the game-winning shot. There's a purpose behind what they do. And they're driven by this internal voice. There's something speaking through them that drives them to do what they do. And if you look at Steph Curry as an example, they talk about when he was in 8th grade and he'd go to the camps and he'd go ahead of time before everybody else and train in the gym. And you remember what summer camp was like. You were worn out. And yet he'd take the time, skip the end of lunch, go ahead of time, work out. But more importantly, when all the other kids would leave the gym, he'd stay and he'd shoot free throws. And he said he wouldn't leave until he swished 5 in a row. Not made, swished 5 in a row. Not because he's crazy, but because he was all about process. And he had this internal voice that was driving him to be the very best he can be at all times. And there's a selflessness. Let's go back to the Warriors. Let's talk about them for a minute. Is this a selfless culture? How many of you are NBA fans and at least follow what they're doing? Here's why they're a selfless culture. Steph Curry did not belong in the NBA. Yes, Dell was his dad, and so there was definitely pedigree there, but all of the experts said, too small, not smart enough, can't shoot well, has a weird shot form, won't be able to, gets injured all the time, too fragile. That's everything they said about him. But Golden State saw something. He said, you take me, you work with me, you give me this shot, and we'll build something special together. So he gets himself into the NBA. He works himself up to be one of the very best. He has a season where he wins the NBA Finals MVP and wins the championship with his team. And he makes so many three-pointers throughout the year that he gets the three-point championship. And they said that if you looked at the curve of three-pointers made, here's what every year they just sort of stack on each other, and then here's Steph way up here. They said it'll take 10 years for the rest of the NBA to catch up with how many three-pointers he made. So this is the guy that finally proved himself, proved all the critics wrong. And then they go and they lose the next year in the finals. And they said, there's something missing from our culture. Let's go get one of the best in the NBA, Kevin Durant. Now, if you're Steph Curry, and you just finally proved you belonged in the NBA after everybody said, you don't belong here, would you want to give up the spotlight to somebody who just walked right in because they had all the talent in the world and walked into the spotlight? No way. Most winter athletes would say, no, this is my team. You go find your own team. I'm king here. He went on the recruiting trip, he and 2 other players. And Steve Kerr says when they were sitting together, the very first night they met KD, I mean, they'd met him before in other settings, but the first time they actually got to spend time with KD, he said they were all like they'd gone to school together, hanging out, like they were buddies for life already. And KD said, the reason I went to Golden State, championships put aside, was because I wanted to be a part of something special. They had a family, and I wanted to be there. So here's Steph, selfless enough to give up the limelight to a guy who's probably going to outshine him. What happened in the next finals? Does anybody know? They go back. Steph did not have a hot hand. He went ice cold. Ice cold in the finals. Guess who had the hot hand? Kevin Durant. So here's the prophecy being fulfilled. I give up the limelight to a guy, and he comes and outshines me. He's going to be the NBA MVP this year, not me, after all that work I've done. Steph started making sure the ball got in Kevin's hands, telling the other players, Kevin's hot, get it to him. Not only that, little Steph Curry, okay? I'm 5'8", so little Steph Curry setting picks against guys like LeBron James. Little Steph Curry setting picks against LeBron James and Kyrie Irving just to get Kevin Durant open so he can make the shots that matter most. Well, guess what? They won, and Kevin Durant was named the NBA Finals MVP. Steph was unselfish enough to give that up. But see, when you have a Warrior athlete who's motivated intrinsically and they become this selfless, it's contagious because they go into the offseason and they can't afford Andre Iguodala because of the salary cap. Guess who took a pay cut and publicly stated he didn't know why he did it, but he felt like it was the right thing to keep a teammate? Andre Iguodala. That's a selfless team. That's what happens to your athletes. When one decides to be this, they all start to be that way. So we have to build our athletes towards this intrinsic motivation. The second psychological construct is locus of control. How many times have you talked to athletes who blame referees, blame the ice, blame cheating on the other team, blame their teammates, but nobody wants to say, what can I do in this situation to control the outcome? It's typically an externally focused locus of control. And it happens when we as adults drive the process with our athletes. And again, I'll talk about that later tonight. But when the kids are doing it because we're telling them they need to do it or because we're joysticking the entire process for them, they begin to lose total control over it. They don't have control. And because they don't have control, like I said, they have no accountability. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's the referee's fault. They blame others, and they're problem-focused. The problem with that winner athlete is it's like American Idol syndrome. Their whole life they've had some success, probably because they were picked the biggest, fastest, strongest when they were very young, because that's how we, in soccer, picked our teams. Well, I got the biggest, fastest, strongest 8-year-olds in the game. I'm going to lump the ball forward and score a bunch of goals. I'm the greatest coach on the planet. Look at what I've developed. They're 8, right? But then those kids at some point in time, because they're 8 and they're doing that, we're all going, good job, Johnny. You're the best, right? And then they come across a defeat, like that kid on American Idol when Simon Cowell says, oh, you're rubbish. You're a horrible singer. And they go, but Mom always said I was the best. They don't know how to handle it because, and then what happens is they get in this quagmire over the problems. They come to you with every problem they have. This is wrong, and this is wrong, and I can't do this, and this is wrong. They don't think about anything but the problems. When you shift them to an internal focus and they start to feel full control over the process, and this is a scary thing, we're the coaches. We're supposed to know everything. We're supposed to control everything. The scariest thing you can do as a coach is to release the game and actually let them have a say. Is that crazy? What do you want to do at practice tonight? Do you want to play this game or this game? No way. Coach, what about when this happens? We would never as a coach say, I don't know, let's figure it out together. Crazy thought. No, we have all the answers. We're in full control. But if we start to release some of that control and we actually trust them to be a part of the process because it is about them, they suddenly take on this high accountability. There's no greater feeling in the world than giving athletes some power in the process, some influence over it. And at some point in time, it triggers within them. Let's say, you as a team, you decide the values together. You and the athletes, they come up with the values for the year, and they come up with the way they're going to conduct themselves, right? About midway through the season, the switch flips from you going, is this what we agreed upon? Is this what you decided were your values for the year? Is this what you decided? Is this how you decided you would behave? To all of a sudden you're in practice and you hear one athlete say to another, hey, is this what we agreed on? Are we playing to the expectations we set it because we agreed on this? There's no better feeling in the world when all of a sudden the athletes start taking accountability instead of shoving it onto others. There's a solo and shared blame. There's a famous story about an academy over in Europe, in England, in the English Premier League. It's a younger academy. It's right below the senior level, the 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They had a coach who ran the entire academy, and they had one of their best teams go out and play a game, and he went to watch them play. And it was one of those games they were supposed to win, right? It was a given they were going to win the game, just depending on how much they'd win by. Well, they didn't show up that night, and they lost in embarrassing fashion. They got it handed to them. They didn't do anything right, and the other team took it to them. Probably like a couple of the World Cup games this year, right? So after the game, the director of the entire academy says, let me have the post-game talk. The person telling the story says, I was there just observing and consulting with him, and he says, I was waiting for him just to hand it to him. I mean, to just rip them up and down and make them do sprints on the field, man. He is going to lay into them. He walks over and says, gentlemen, we just weren't ready tonight. It is our fault for not preparing you properly, and it is your issue for not being quite ready mentally, but we will go back to the drawing board, and together we'll sort this out. That is a shared solo blame. First off, instead of saying, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you failed me as a coach, you failed the academy, his first thing was we. We weren't ready. He didn't say they failed him, they weren't ready. And then he said, we, as in the coaching staff, I, solo blame, didn't prepare you. That's a warrior athlete who can step off the court and say, or off the ice and say, what can I do differently next time? This didn't work, but it's not just my teammates and it's not just my coach, and it's definitely not just the ice or the referees. What can I do next time to make this a better process? And they become, because of that, solution focused. Those are those athletes that hit problems and solve them. We want our athletes to be problem aware, but solution focused. We want them to recognize their mishaps, their mistakes, their miscomings, but we want them to start thinking about solutions. Do you all know who Bill Davidge is? I was lucky enough to be at Miami University back in the 90s, and Bill Davidge had coached there and then went on and worked with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think he's still in hockey somewhere. Bill was my basic instruction coordinator. I was a gym teacher. I was there for a master's in sports psychology, basically, behavior and performance. And so we're all a bunch of former jocks. So what do? They have us teach the gym classes to the undergraduates. It was great. I taught softball and tennis and basketball, and talked him into golf one time, and I was horrible at golf, but he's like, all right, I'll trust you and have you teach it. But Bill was the kind of leader that used to say to us, when you come to my office, come to me with a solution, not a problem, please. That's that warrior mentality. That's that internal locus of control. There's this problem out there, but what can I personally do to fix it? So get your athletes problem aware, but solution focused. Mindset. Who's all familiar with Carol Dweck? Growth mindset. Okay, a couple of you. All right, I'll touch on her just a little bit. There are two types of mindsets, and what you are familiar, right? See, this is a big buzzword in teaching, and it has been for a while. And I know there's some research out there that's sort of debunking some of her stuff, but it's still, if you get to the heart of it. I'm sorry? All in. My son's district was too, and if you get to the heart of it, it's the basic core concept is there. Whether people can't replicate or research, it's there, isn't it? It's amazing to see your children shift in the classroom. So there's the idea of the fixed mindset. A winner has this fixed mindset. Everything's short term. If I can just have one undefeated season, if I can just pitch one, or if I can just have one shutout on the ice, or pitch one perfect game, right? That's all they think about. And as a coach, that's what I used to think about. I can remember as a very young coach, I started at 16 years old, and I can remember getting into my 20s and going, I've yet to have a losing season. And I would get near the end of the season and I'd say, oh my gosh, I'm 4-5. I've got to win out the rest of the game so I don't have a losing season. Wasn't my experience, it was theirs. Winning. Do you think the kids really cared? They were 8, 9, 10 years old. They were out there to have fun. But that's that short-term mindset. The other problem with the fixed mindset, and I'll give really quick, so I apologize because I'm going to dumb down her research, not dumb down, but make it like CliffsNotes research. What Carol did is she worked with school children years and years ago, and she discovered these two mindsets. People have fixed or growth, and how she discovered them was she was giving the children puzzles, and at the end of the puzzle, she told half the group, you are smart, when they did well on it. She told the other half of the group, you work hard. 6 words, 3 and 3. You are smart, you work hard. She then gave them the choice. Do you want a hard puzzle or easy puzzle the next time? Guess which group, almost to a kid, picked the easy puzzle? Smart group. Carol endowed you with a gift. She told you were smart. You're smart. You don't have to do anything. You were just given this gift, so why would you challenge it? When I'm going to take the easy puzzle and get that praise again. She also discovered that there are praise junkies out there who love being told you are smart, and they'll do anything they can to get that praise, so they'll cheat or take the easy route. This group said, give me the hard puzzle. Most of them. The next puzzle, she gave them all the same puzzle, and it was a hard puzzle, very difficult. Guess which group threw a fit? This group. Carol had just told them they were smart. They were born smart, obviously. She waved her wand and endowed them with it. And then she just took it away by giving them a puzzle they couldn't solve. Their whole identity was shattered. Remember the American Idol syndrome? Whole identity shattered. So they were upset. One kid wanted to quit and go home. One kid said it was the dumbest thing he'd ever done. Not only that, but remember, we want the praise, and we believe that it's something we can't control with no effort. So those same kids went around the corner out into the hall after taking it and doing poorly. And another researcher asked them, how'd you do? And they lied. You lied about your results and said you did well, even though you didn't, because they didn't want this other person knowing they were no longer smart. This group, Loved the hard puzzle. This is where my wife takes issue with it. She's like, really? I can't see a kid saying that. And then then my kid comes along and yeah, we can see him saying it. This group was like, thank you for the challenge, one kid said. Now we're talking. They were excited because they were being challenged, because where was their value? Their value was in being hard workers, not being smart. So if you can't solve a problem and your value is in being smart, you're going to blow up. But if you can't solve a problem and your value is in being a hard worker, you're going to be excited to try to solve that problem to show that your value is going to come to use. Finally, she gives them a puzzle that's about as easy as the last one. And correct me, because I always get the stats flipped on this one. The group that she said you are smart, their scores went down 20% roughly, right? And the group that she said you work hard, their scores went up 30% roughly, right around that range. Is that right? Something like that? So it was a 50-point swing, 50% swing. You got better on the last puzzle. You got worse. All because of 3 little words. So when we praise our children on outcomes, on winning, and at ages very young on things they can't control, like being 5'8", like I was, and being in 6th grade and being really good at basketball, I had no control over the fact I was 6 inches taller than every other kid. That's why I was good. When we start praising them on all this stuff, they have that American Idol syndrome that I already described. It's worse. Get to the pros. When athletes are focused on all of this, the short term, they seek what's called perfection. And they did interviews of NFL players in their careers right after winning the Super Bowl, because psychologists wanted to see what it felt like for them. And they said, oh, the moment after you win, there's just euphoria, elation, joy, all of that. But some of them begin to get depressed on the plane ride home. It's perfection. You're the world champion. You're one of the greatest ever to play the game. You won the Super Bowl. It's the pinnacle. Why are you depressed? And their answer was, is that all there is? I thought there'd be more. I thought this would feel different. Now what do I do? You see, again, like I said earlier, it's not about what you get when you arrive. It's about who you become along the way, right? Whereas that growth mindset, the hard workers, they're long term. When you're telling a kid that they're working hard, and I love the fact you're working to solve that puzzle, and it's okay to make mistakes because we're going to find a way around that. We're going to fix this. When they have that mindset, everything's a marathon to them. There's always a chance to get better and to learn. It's a constant ever ascent. We always call it the ever ascension up that ladder, right? They want to keep climbing. And it's all about effort. My daughter is very smart. She tested out on everything as a kid. She was one of those kids at 2nd grade. They brought in kids. We lived in Oxford, Ohio at Miami University. And they brought in kids from the college to work with her and another girl in her grade, because they were reading at like a 5th or 6th grade level at 2nd, and they just moved them on up and, reading at high school level in 5th grade and all that stuff, right? And her counselor in 7th grade says, be very, very careful, because we have set a very, very wrong precedent for your daughter. She will not be valedictorian if we keep going down this path. My wife and I are like, what? She goes, growth mindset. She said everybody has told her you are smart and given her a break her whole life. She does not think that she needs to work hard for it. And valedictorians are not the ones who it comes naturally. Valedictorians are the ones who learn to work hard, because when the grind starts happening in sophomore and junior year, those are the ones that bear down on it. Here's what's interesting. She gets to sophomore year and she's about flunking out of high school. She wanted to go to a private high school in Cincinnati. She tested off the charts for the score. I went to a private school. Cincinnati is a German town, so it's all about these private Catholic schools, right? And all boys schools and all girls schools. And I went to the St. X, the private Catholic boys school. And she says, I want to be like Dad and go to St. Ursula. So we let her take the test. She tested 3rd highest in the whole city. She gets in, walks into a scholarship. Thank goodness, right? 3rd in her class, starting out. By sophomore year, she's about flunking out. She's not doing her homework. And now she's in things like calculus, and where you have to do the work because it stacks on itself. And she's like, I'm not doing well on the tests. I don't get why. Because you're not doing the homework. You got to put in the work, kiddo. It's worse. She would actually sometimes do the work, but she would get so lazy about it because people would give her breaks that she wouldn't turn it in. I was like, honey, that's like baking cookies and throwing them away. You didn't even get to enjoy the work you did. She goes, I know, Dad, but I just forgot. And I was like, no big deal. Well, guess what? Back in 8th grade, she had a science project that spanned the entire length of the year. And last week of school, when she was supposed to turn it in, she couldn't find it. She goes to her teacher in a panic, crying, I can't find the science experiment. The book's gone. a whole year's worth of collecting leaves and tabulating them and gone. Teacher says, it's okay, you're a smart kid, and I saw you doing the work. We just won't add that to your grade. Remove those points from her grade so she wouldn't fail the class. Didn't do her any favors, because when she gets to high school and there's no such thing as a break, she struggled. Well, here's what's really cool. She was not valedictorian. She was middle of the class, not valedictorian. But it was a great lesson for her, because the other day her brother was struggling with something, and he's the same way. And she says to him, I'm in the other room, and I'm like almost in tears, because she says, hey, buddy, listen, it's okay. You're going to make mistakes, but you got to put in the work. Don't be like me and coast through on just your brains. She's like, do the work, buddy. It'll pay off in the long run. Trust me, I wish I hadn't made the same mistakes you're making now. She learned the value of hard work. So it ended up being a lesson for her, but she had to shift from that fixed to that growth mindset. See, it's a survivor mindset. It's not the American Idol where everybody gives us a free pass and tells us, you're so good, and then one day we have this epic failure and we melt down in front of the world. It's like Siri, who was one of the participants on Survivor. She went on 3 Survivors. She was a self-professed couch potato to Survivor person. She said, I'm laying on the couch watching it. My life is in shambles. I'm, in bad shape, and I'm going downhill, and the doctor's like, you got to do something. And she says, I see Survivor, and I go, I want to do that. I want to be able to prove to my kids that I can do that. So she goes on Survivor. Then she goes back as an all-star. Then she goes back a 3rd time as a game changer. And on the 3rd one, they're doing an obstacle out in the water. And she can't walk the balance beam across that water. And her team loses. Some of them were frustrated, but then Jeff Probst, the host, says, do you want to leave, or do you want, the contest is over, but we will sit here and we will wait as long as it takes. Do you want to leave and go back to your tribe, or do you want to finish that task? And she says, Jeff, I'm a survivor. I want to finish the task. So her team all swim over to her and cheer her on as she finally, and who knows how long, because they do all the cutting of the tape and everything, who knows how long it took, but she finally crossed that balance beam. And then when they're at the show at the end, the reunion show, he asks her about that. And she said, because that's what matters more than winning that, was to prove to my kids that anything is possible for anyone if you're willing to put in the work. That is a warrior mentality. And they seek what's called everyday excellence. We don't want our athletes seeking one-day perfection. It's not about being perfect. Nobody's perfect. We're human. We're supposed to be flawed. What it's about is every day being a little bit better than the person you were yesterday. What can I do today that improves on what I did yesterday? Little kids juggling. Coach, I did 3 juggles yesterday. Can you do 4 today? That's all you're asking of them. It's the idea of marginal gains. Has anybody ever heard of the marginal gains? Aggregation of marginal gains? There's a guy named Brailsford in London who worked with English cycling, and he worked with their Sky, their Tour de France team. When they brought him in, they said, are you going to make big sweeping changes? He said, those are like yo-yo diets. We'll make a big change and everybody will move right back to their comfort zone because it's too much on them. We're going to make little changes every day. 1% every day for 100 days equals 100% improvement. So they looked at pedal height, and they looked at leg length, and they looked at seat height, and they looked at angle of the handlebars, and they looked at sleep patterns and massages and nutrition and everything. They got so geeky that on the Tour de France, when Wiggins was actually leading and wearing the yellow jersey and had a chance to finally be the first ever English person to win the Tour de France, which was one of his goals, I've heard 2 stories. I'll tell the one I like best. They're carrying around his mattress in the chase truck so at night he could sleep on his own mattress, because that's when he got his best night's sleep, and sleep mattered to his performance. That's geeky about everyday excellence. He told him it would take him 5 years at least to finally be on the podium of the Tour de France. 3. And then they went to the Olympics, and they won the most medals they'd ever won, and they just eclipsed everybody in the field. All because every day, as a team, they were willing to wake up and say, what can we do today that's a little bit better than yesterday? How can I be a better version of me today? And if you want to follow one of the greatest rugby players ever to play the game, his phrase was always, start again. Richie McCall wakes up every morning and writes in a little notebook, start again. That's what we want our athletes to think about. Hey, you make a mistake, that's okay. Can I be a little bit more excellent tomorrow? This is that ever ascension. Goal orientation. We already know what the goal of a winter athlete is, right? It's all about the arrival. What can I get when I get there? It's glory-based. I mean, how many of you seen that win one NBA championship and go, I'm the greatest of all time? Because that's what matters to them. Like, we shouldn't even be having that conversation. Why are we comparing Michael Jordan to guys that played today? Why? Why is he still on your mind? Does it matter how many championships he won and how many you've won? Or does it? No. But see, that's where our mind is the glory. I want to be more of a glory hound. And there's this vague no steps concept. My son, loved him. When he first tried soccer, he said, Dad, I'm going to be a pro soccer player. And I'm going to play for Chelsea in the English Premier League. And I'm going to buy a Lamborghini and I'm going to drive home every weekend to see you back in Ohio. I said, well, first off, let's make sure we get that geography class taken, right? Because they haven't built that bridge yet, buddy. But secondly, how are you going to get there? He goes, I don't know. It's vague. We talk to our athletes all the time, and they have these big goals, but they don't know how to get there. And let me tell you something. If you and I decide to climb Everest, because I use the Everest analogy a lot in my life, because what I'm doing is my Everest. If you and I decide to climb Everest together, and we're standing at the base of the mountain, and you know the exact path, and where base camp is, and the supplies you need, and all the other things, and I'm standing there, and all I see is the top, guess who's going to start that climb? You, not me. I'm going to look at the top of that Everest and go, no way. Right? But that's what we do when we start setting these huge arrival goals for our kids at 8 years old, telling them that they are the number 2 hockey player in the country. Or my son's U10 team is ranked 3rd in the nation in soccer. We're giving them this with no steps to get there. They don't have those SMART goals. It's not that they're not smart people. They don't have those specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-sensitive goals. You ask a great athlete. I was with a group of swimmers a couple months ago, and I asked one of them, what's your goal? And he said, I want to be in the Olympics. And I said, how are you going to do this? He says, well, by this age, I want to be able to accomplish this, this, and this. And by this age, I'm going to do this. And then in the summer of that year, I'm going to do this. And like, he had steps and numbers. He knew times. He knew where he wanted to be at certain ages and certain events based on what he was seeing in the field around him. Like, he had a plan. I was like, I'm climbing Everest with that guy, and he's taking care. Here, just take everything, and I'll follow you, right? But that's because, as I said, it's about the arrival for our winter athletes. They don't think about the process there because they're so focused on getting there. Warrior athletes love the journey. They are values-based. They don't care about the glory. They care about the values. Listen to the conversations with the Golden State Warriors, and I know sometimes I stand in rooms where people are like, I hate that, because they're building a dynasty. But listen to the conversations of them after they win the championship. They talk about the values. Oh, we're all there to play for joy, and we're there for each other, and there's this teamwork dynamic, and there's this love of the game, and there's this integrity and honesty and authenticity and vulnerability, and they're using these words that we're all like, we want our kids to say those things. They are warriors. The path is very clear. It's okay for our kids to dream big. I will never squash a dream of any child. If they say they want to accomplish something, I will never squash it, but I will say to them, great. How do we get there? How can I help you get there? Because what it does is it refocuses. When I asked my son that, he sort of changed his dream a little bit because he's like, My daughter, actually, great example. She wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. She did all this pre-work to it and everything, but it was mom and dad paying for the gym membership and driving her at 5 a.m. and all this. All of a sudden, we realized we were driving the process, and she was just hanging in the back seat. So I sat her down one day and I said, hey, this is great, but do you know what it takes? Because you can quit on push-ups in the gym here right now, but at 5 a.m. in the pouring rain in Colorado in that wet, pelting, cold rain on a fall day, you won't be able to quit doing the push-ups there. There needs to be an internal drive because I can't stand over you and say, you got this, or come on, one more. I won't be there. You have to decide to do it then. And she said, you know what? I wanted to go for the engineering and the flying, but that's not my thing to do the other stuff. So we had to reset her goal a little bit. But once she understood that there had to be a clear path to get to that goal, she was more than happy to try to adjust to it. That's what we have to say with our kids. We just have to be honest with them. This is what it takes to get there, and I'm there for you along that path. But it just doesn't happen for you overnight. And of course, it's about the journey. I love it when a pro athlete talks about the process or the journey. You just won the Stanley Cup. It was a hard process this year. We from the start of the year, right in pre-camp, and we did this, and we worked on this, and man, what a great year it was to spend time with my teammates and coach, and we were evolving. The language is all about the journey, right? That's why some athletes look so confused when they say, you just won the Super Bowl, what are you going to do next? And they go, oh, go to Disney World? Because they're not thinking about that arrival. They're already going, how am I going to get back next year? How am I going to take this journey again? They're already planning. There was a famous quote from Richie McCall again of the New Zealand All Blacks after a game. They won a fantastic test, I think, against France. They weren't expected to win, even though they're a pretty darn good team. And it was the semifinals for the World Tries or whatever. And somebody asked him and said, well, how's it feel to beat France? And he goes, man, that just means we get to go back to work on Monday. That just means that we got one more chance to play. Like, we go back to work on Monday, and the gift is we get to start over and start doing this all again. Like, he was done with the game already, and he wasn't even thinking about the next game. He was thinking about Monday and the journey. Goal orientation. We want to get our athletes focused on the process, on the journey. Listen, it's a tough path for kids to play youth sports because we think about the skills, right? And we think about all the tactics. What we forget sometimes is that 12 and 13-year-olds have hormones and school issues and friend issues and trying to navigate this world and social media issues and mom and dad pressure issues and teammate pressure issues. So when they're out on ice, they're in a pressure cooker. It's not just the sport itself, it's all the other psychological and sociological pieces of the puzzle that are bearing down on them. And so what we need to do is stop getting them to look there, because this is a treacherous path here. And they need to make sure that they're looking at the path itself so they don't fall off it. Competitive nature. We want our kids to compete. Everything I'm espousing is not making snowflakes or not making our next generation soft or anything like that. It's shifting the competitive mindset. And here's what I mean by that. Kids that have a winner mentality, and coaches, because I was guilty of this. I started at 16. You better believe I made every mistake I'm talking about. Most of the stories are me making those mistakes as a coach. I'm not ripping on other coaches. I'm ripping on me, right? We see everybody as the enemy. The guy that's fighting for the same starting spot as me, enemy number 1. Guy across the ice from me, enemy number 2. Referee, enemy number 3. That idiot in the stands that keeps yelling, shoot, enemy number 4, right? Everybody's an enemy. Because of that, we start to seek the easy route. Have you ever watched kids at play? Like just at play on their own, and they're making up a game even. And you can pick out the growth mindset, the warrior kid, because the warrior kid is finding the kids that may be the same skill or a little bit tougher and going and taking them on. But the kid who's been told his or her life that it's about winning and that they're the best, and they've been picked for all the best teams because they're 5'8", 200 pounds at 10 years old, they're the ones that go and find the group of kids who maybe aren't as good as them, and they stay over here so they can be king of the court. I used to have buddies like that. I'd be like, hey, we're seniors. Stop playing with a freshman and come over with us. No, man, I'm winning over here, right? There's this finish the skill mentality. There's a famous picture that we post on Changing the Game all the time of guys running, and all of them are stepping on a line to make a cut, and one guy's about this much short of the line in the picture. And everybody says, that's the difference between winning and losing. No, I say, no, that's the difference between a winner and a warrior. You see, he wanted to be first to finish that run. But he cheats himself and his teammates, and everybody else doesn't cheat me as coach. I did the runs when I was his age, right? He's not cheating us. He's cheating his teammates because it matters to finish the skill. Or my son, who got this app one time for soccer, and you get rewards when you do the skills. They show you a video, and then you do the skill, and then you clock in and tell you how many times you did the skill, and then you get a badge or a sticker or a noise or a dance or something. I don't know. He's now in Fortnite, and the kid asked, hey, can I have $10 for what? So my character can dance a certain way. I'm like, really? It's a virtual dance on a computer screen. Like, you don't even get to do the dance in real life with the character. I mean, it's just fake. $10. But he wanted it, right? So he's got this app, and he comes in, he goes, Dad, I did 20 toe touches in a minute. I'm like, all right, buddy. Let's apply the warrior mindset. Boy, man, you worked hard for that. So do you think you can go back out and get just 21? Just a little bit, maybe 30, just a little bit better than the last time? He goes, I'm on it, Dad. And he disappears, right? I don't know how much time goes by, but he comes back in and he goes, Dad, I broke my record. I said, all right, what'd you do? And he goes, 600 toe taps in a minute. I'm like, I don't think that's physically possible. You see, he was gaming the system because the more he did, the more badges and rewards he got. So he just wanted to finish the skill. He wasn't even doing it properly at that point in time. He's maybe even lying about it, but he was getting the reward. There's also a fear of mistakes. When things come easy or we think that it's about being perfect, we fear mistakes. We freeze up because we don't want to face the wrath of the parents or coach. Always told my young coaches, because I made the same mistakes, don't ever, soccer, so you have to forgive me, don't ever sub a kid out when he or she makes a mistake, because you have told them never try. Because if you're in practice saying, we're teaching you this new skill and I want you to try it in a game, and the moment they mess up on the skill, you pull them out and put them on the bench and you don't say a word, that kid goes, ooh, so coach actually means don't try new things or else I don't get to play. So you got to give them the thumbs up and let them try it again. Do it again, take another risk, right? They can't fear mistakes. They have to see mistakes as part of the process. We moved from Ohio to San Diego, 2,600-mile drive or whatever. We load the kids and the dog and wife and everything that we didn't sell and in a van, and we start driving. Destination, San Diego. We get to Indianapolis, and it says, welcome to Indianapolis. And I go, oh, crud, we didn't make it. We'll just stop here and deal with the snow for the rest of our lives. We failed. No. It's just a road sign telling me I'm not quite there, keep going. What if the sign had said, welcome to Erie, Pennsylvania? Well, if you're my son, he's like, oh, cool, we're going the right direction, right? But if you know your geography, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going the wrong direction. I better adjust course. That's what failure is in sports for kids. It's not a full stop. It's got to be a road sign telling us they're either headed in the right direction and keep doing it, and it'll come, or let's take a step back and tweak it and see how we can solve it, because maybe we're not going the right direction with this. And they win at all costs. When we, as adults, win the baseball championship, right, the Little League World Championship, because we were using kids who had fake birth certificates or using kids from a part of the city that didn't belong in that part of the city because we were recruiting them over, and we get caught, and then we go, you're cheating those children. You're setting a bad example. We need to stop and think about that. We decided as adults to win at all costs. The kids got punished for it, and then we blamed other adults for punishing those kids. It's never been about winning. I mean, that's great. I like to win like the other person, but it's never been about winning when we played youth sports. It was more about this competition. You see, the root word for competition is Latin, competere, to strive together. To strive together. There's nothing in there about an enemy. There's nothing in there about vanquish thy enemies, kill the other team. No, you see, the other team needs to be there for me to improve. Because if you're better than me, which guarantee you're better than me in hockey, guaranteed, because I'm spending the whole time on my back. You're better than me. My hope is that I take something away from that game that allows me to improve, that you made me better. Best NFL speech ever given for the, I think it's the Outland Award, is the lineman of the year. Guy says, gets up to take the award and says, this goes out to Joe Smith, and the place falls silent because they're trying to figure out, who's Joe Smith? I don't remember the name. And he says, you don't know him, but I do, because you see, he's on the training roster. He doesn't even travel with the team. He doesn't even have his name on the back of the jersey, makes the league minimum, shows up every day and gets the living snot beat out of him. But you see, Joe lines up across from me every day at practice, and every day he looks at me through his face mask and says, today's the day I get by you, so hold on tight. And every day he fights me harder than any lineman I've ever faced starting in the NFL. He beats on me. He presses me to be my very best. And at the end of every practice, when I can go, whew, I kept my starting role again today, Joe smacks me and says, I'm coming again tomorrow. Good job. Thank you, Joe Smith, for making me the man I am today. That was the best acceptance speech ever, because that guy realized that Joe wasn't the enemy, even though Joe might take his starting role or force him out of it. Joe was an ally in making him better. We should teach our children to see the other team as an opportunity for iron to sharpen iron. We should teach our children to cherish the challenge, never to back down, but to see it as an opportunity to grow. Listen, you may lose today. Listen, this person may be better today, but the hope is that you take something away that makes you a better person. Because you don't forge weapons in water. You forge them in fire. Our kids need to cherish that fire of the competition. They need to learn to master the skill, not finish it. We're going to get this growth mindset in teaching. We're going to work on this till you get it right, because that's what matters. We're going to work on this till you understand the concept at its core so that you can do it again and again anytime you want without me helping you. My son's teacher this year, he'd take tests, and if he did poorly on them, the teacher would say, all right, here's your grade, go and correct them and show me your corrections, and those will help alter the grade. Like, the grade wasn't final anymore. He had a chance to work on it and keep completing it. And I don't know how you think about that, but I was pretty excited that my son was being taught that he could always fix his mistakes and work hard and grow. Now, it only changed a little bit, right? You know, it wasn't like, oh, my kid breezed through with hundreds, but he was taught that you can always fix things, right? They're mistake hunters. They don't fear failure. They go out every day looking for mistakes. What can I fix today about myself? I think I just saw a quote by Conor McGregor and was like, oh my goodness, that's exactly it. He said that. He called himself, it wasn't a mistake, but he called himself a something hunter. And it was all about every day he was looking for something he could, a problem hunter, he could fix about himself as an athlete. And they want to compete at all times. We don't want our kids to be winners. It's not about winning at all costs. We want our kids to show up and compete every time, in training, in games, in life. If we teach our kids to be warriors and they see every challenge as an opportunity to get better, and every person that competes with them as an ally and this ever ascension to greatness, right, to excellence, then they're going to show up and compete at all times. And I don't know about you, but if that's the one thing my kids take away from their experiences in Civil Air Patrol and the small portion of youth sports and whatever else they're doing, is that they can always show up and compete, then I'm feeling pretty good about how they're going to take care of me when I'm in my old age. But if they're worried about this, I'm kind of worried where they're going to put me when I'm too old to take care of myself, right? So what I want to show you now is an example of a warrior legacy, because everything we've talked about, all right, everything we talked about was put in the process about 100 years ago.
Children growing up aspire to be All Blacks. I think it's the heart and soul of New Zealand.
I know how much the team meant when I was 6 years old, getting up in the middle of the night to watch the All Blacks play.
When they're in the All Black team, they've been passed on the responsibility of that black jersey with the silver fern. It's their time in that jersey, and it's their responsibility to enhance the legacy. Better men make better All Blacks. That's really about self-improvement. And it's not only about rugby, it's about life. Young men driving together to produce something that they're proud of.
I think it just encompasses that idea of you can always be better, whether it's off the field or on the field, and if you have that characteristic, then you'll be a great All Black.
Good people make great teams, and people that aren't very nice, although they might be superstars, we don't want them. It's about sustaining a culture of success. Week in, week out, year in, year out, being the best team in the world, that's our goal.
If you recognise how much of an honour it is to pull on the black jersey, then the jersey will let you do things that you wouldn't have thought possible.
As All Blacks, you're expected to win. And does it give us any advantage to Haka? Without question. It's about going to battle with your friends and your mates, standing shoulder to shoulder.
It's not only about playing great rugby on the rugby field, it's about how these young men conduct themselves off the pitch. That humbleness, keeping your feet on the ground, realising that you can get better all the time.
The legacy of the jersey is more intimidating than any opposition, and the key thing for us as past All Blacks is to make sure that legacy continues.
I'm just very grateful that I got to spend as many years playing, for a team that I loved.
The last 100 years, the All Blacks are the most successful sporting team ever, and long may that continue.
Love that video. Credit to Dove. It's a great video. The reason why I like it is there's a better one that I typically show, and I have it at the end. We may not have time for it, but I'll put it up for you as we're closing out. The reason I like this one is they talk about everything we just talked about. Humbleness and better people make better All Blacks, and it's about being great people off the pitch, and it's everything we just talked about, succeeding in life, right? They've been doing this for about 114 years. This isn't anything new. And I've actually had people in the crowd before say, aren't we just softening the next generation when we do this kind of lovey-dovey stuff? And I'm like, it's not lovey-dovey, man. It's psychology, it's science, it's backed, it's researched. This is what it creates. Now here's why it's so special. Who's aware of the All Blacks and their legacy? So you know where I'm headed with this. 114 years roughly, over 70% winning rate in 114 years. They do nothing but win. That's why the one guy said we are expected to win. It's not that they want to win, they're just expected. Those are the expectations based on the legacy they've created. 10 years ago or so, they had some issues off field that caused Graham Henry and his team to get on the flight when they got bounced embarrassingly out of a cup. And then a bunch of their guys were found so inebriated that in the bushes outside the hotel that a team from another country had to carry them to their rooms. That was embarrassing for a team that's values-led, purpose-driven. They got on a plane and he said, we fix this before the wheels touch down. This will not happen. We will not be the ones that mar the legacy, right? So they fixed it. So in the last 10 years, they have over a 90% winning rate. Guess what they did to fix it? They brought in psychologists, they brought in yoga specialists, Pilates specialists, they brought in mental health specialists to talk about safety and vulnerability. And when people say, when I need help, can you imagine a 250-pound man with blood coming down the side of his face from a match going up and going, Coach, I don't feel well mentally. I'm having a bad week. I need help. Imagine the message that sends to our kids who are all feeling that way, that it's safe to tell us they need something. Versus, no, toxic male, I'm macho, I can handle it all, right? They are values-led. And if you'll bear with me, how are you feeling? You want to stand up and stretch for a second? We good? You can if you want. All right, they are values-led. And so what I want to do now, if you'll bear with me, is take the next 15 minutes to show you the 15 values that come out of them as All Blacks, and I'll rush through them a little bit so that I don't take up too much of your time. And it's in a book called Legacy. Legacy by James Kerr, K-E-R-R. Can't read it as a manual front to cover because he bounces around in time and in concepts. It's really tough, but it's a great study group book for a team of coaches. I did it with a team of coaches and it blew us away. It changed our minds and it helped us. I'm sorry? Legacy by James Kerr. And what he discovered when he embedded with them, and what's really cool is they did not know he was going to tell some of this stuff, so they were very upset at first that this stuff went public in the book. But then they realized they needed to lean into it because that's what they are, vulnerable, right? He talks about 15 things that make them unique and special that you can use in business, in life, and guess what? I've used it with teams as young as 8 years old. So let's jump into these and just try to run through them. Legacy. It's a values-led, purpose-driven organization, New Zealand All Blacks. Winning is just a byproduct of this amazing DNA. And over 114 years, at some point in time, you got to say, the athletes have changed. The fields changed, the stadiums changed, the people in the stands, the coaches, everybody. Even the ball's changed a little bit. There's something in the DNA of this organization that keeps winning. It's not the people, it's the culture. First thing they talk about is sweeping the sheds. You see, as a New Zealand All Black, you're never too big to do the small things that matter. So much so, or that need to be done. So much so that after they won the World Championship, Richie McCaw, greatest player in the world, was caught by James Kerr sweeping the shed, cleaning the locker room. Now, what's going through your mind is you're the best player in the world. You just won the MVP. Why do you need to clean up? His answer, right? Because only All Blacks clean up after All Blacks. We don't expect anybody to do our dirty work for us. So I tell this story, and a buddy of mine who was working at IMG a few years back says, Reed, I got to tell you a story, man. It goes even further. He goes, the Sevens were coming through IMG recently. And he says, I wanted to see if this was true. So the Sevens is a smaller numbered team. It's only, instead of 15 on the field, 7 on the field. So it's a smaller group. Still big dudes. And he says, I go in the locker room, I time it, and I go in the locker room after a training session just long enough that I know they've probably showered and are getting ready and everything. And he says, and they're sweeping the floor and wiping the counter and picking up tape and grass. He goes, they're living it. thousands of miles from home where people in Florida are like, who are you? They don't even know who the All Blacks are. I've given so many talks where I started talking about the All Blacks, and at least one hand goes up and goes, excuse me, who are the All Blacks, right? We don't know them, but it is ingrained in them to sweep that shed. So I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, and he goes, Reed, I don't know where the broom came from. I was looking for the broom the next day. That's how geeky, how committed they are to these values. They go for the gap. Teach your athletes, no matter how good they are tomorrow, there is somebody looking to gun them. That no matter how great you are, you have always got to be willing to change your game. As coaches, are we willing to change our game? I've got a bad back. I've been struggling for 8 months now, and I keep going to different people to try to figure it out. It's muscle. It's all muscle. But if I went to somebody and said,
Don't worry, I got it. I got leeches, and we've been doing this way for, 30 years now. I don't care about the science.
I'd probably say, or worse, heart issue. If you go to your cardiologist and he or she says, oh, I'm going to use a technique we've been using for 80 years. You're going to be just fine. I'm going to seek a second opinion. Yet as coaches, we're doing what we did 50, 60 years ago and going, it worked for me. I turned out great. I had a friend say that to me, not a friend. I had somebody say that to me one time. It works great. My coach did this and I turned out great. Your coach screamed at you and called you a donkey when you were 8 years old, and now you're doing it to 8-year-olds? I don't know if it worked. I don't think you did turn out too well, my friend. Here's a card of somebody you might want to talk to, right? But that's what we do. Luckily for USA Hockey, I brag about you all the time because 10 years ago you saw the writing on the wall and said, we got to change something. And only lacrosse is the only other sport that said, they're on to something and started mimicking what you're doing. And guess what? 2 sports are the only ones whose attrition rate isn't epic. Lacrosse and hockey. Everybody else, they're bleeding out numbers of kids. They're just losing kids by the masses. More are leaving the sport than are signing up in those other sports. And they keep going, well, we're still doing it the same way. I don't get it. Change your game. Blue, keep a blue head. It's been adapted by other teams now too. It's the idea of control your attention. What they realized is that the All Blacks, when they get into competition, would freak out. I'm going to really run through it real quickly, but it's the idea of the brain in the palm of the hand, right? This is the brain stem, fight or flight response. This is the amygdala. That's the instinctual, emotional response, right? So if these two are doing things, we're doing some crazy stuff. But see, it's taken care of by the frontal lobe and logic and everything else, all of the other facets of the brain that control our behaviors and allow us to think logically and analytically. The problem is when you're in competition, you lose your head sometimes and you go, and guess who's running the show? And I just posted a video recently of AAU basketball players fighting with a ref and coaches. Everybody in the video was like this. Everybody, including the adults who should be the role models. See, the All Blacks realized that they can't function like this. Not just well, but then stupid things happen, right? So they started working on how they can ground themselves and keep their attention. Are we teaching our athletes mindfulness? Are we helping our athletes with pregame talks about affirmations? I know it sounds crazy, but the All Blacks do it. You watch Richie McCall, and they're in a tight game, and they may be losing, and all of a sudden Richie will stop, stamp his feet to ground himself, close his eyes, and then he says something. And I wish I knew what he said, but he says something. That's his trigger word to ground him back in the moment, to relax. Score doesn't matter. What just happened doesn't matter. What's going to happen doesn't matter. Get in the moment, Richie. Stop letting this dude run amok. Get control. We should be doing that with our kids, right? We should be helping with our kids. The last thing you want to say to a kid is, relax. That's the worst thing you can say. But there's got to be a way. One way is when a child is really upset, is to slow down ourselves, especially if they're young. Get down to eye level. Okay, I see you're upset about something. Let's problem solve and figure out what this is. That's the hardest thing as a coach to say, because what you want to say is, Johnny, get on the line. Right? I know I was that way. I do it with my own kids. They're like, Dad, Dad, Dad. I'm like, what? Instead of, okay, Cooper, I see you're a little upset, buddy. Let's talk this out. And that, when we model it, they begin to slow down into it. Follow the spearhead. Rudyard Kipling quote, for the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Very simple. The Golden State Warriors exemplify this. It is not about one individual player. It is about all of them. In the Maori tradition, there are 2 spearheads. I always thought it was 3, but I just read it. There are 2. They both have to be going to the target, because if one doesn't, then it pulls the whole spear away, right? my idea was that the spearheads had been thrown towards the target 114 years ago, and that shaft is still building behind it. Do you want to be the generation that ruins a legacy that started 114 years ago? No, I'm following the spearhead, folks, right? For us, it's to teach our kids that no one person is greater than the team itself. We need each other, and guess what? High tides raise all ships. So if we invest in each other like the Golden State Warriors did, even though Kevin Durant wins the NBA MVP, we all succeed and look better at it. So that your athletes need to invest in each other. Ritualize to actualize. Create a culture. This is the one that I hear a lot about. Oh, I just don't have time to do this. You don't have time not to create a culture on your team. It's little things. I had a coaching colleague who would grab the kids after practice, take 5 minutes, tell a story, teach the moral of the story. He's going to apply what we just learned in practice. We've done things like had values that the team developed, and every week it was a new value that we focused on. So that I would call out kids, and in practice, instead of saying, hey, great pass, I'd say, hey, you just showed great teamwork with what you did there. That's our value this week. Good job. Or college coaches bringing their kids in, at the end of practice and saying, all right, shout out time. Who can shout out a teammate for a value? Oh, Lisa, man, she showed great integrity. And Susie was really authentic today and showed up and worked hard. And the players are calling each other out for the values. That's a culture. Invest in the culture as much as you do the technical and tactical skills, because here's the thing. They will forget the skills someday. I forget almost everything I learned in the sports I played. But what I remember are the values. What I remember are the things that have kept me succeeding in life beyond it, or at least my definition of success, right? Play with purpose. Ask why. This is a tough one. Teach your athletes to ask why. In a respectful, polite, professional manner, but why are we doing this way? I had a group of athletes ask me, Coach, why are we doing this way? I've always done it this way. This is how my coach coached. And they said, can we try a different way, Coach? First reaction was, shut up and get on the line, right? And I went, okay, wait. Okay, let's do. Maybe there's a better way. The All Blacks are taught to question everything so they can go for the gap. Be a good ancestor. Plant trees you'll never see. If you're in a club environment, I heard him talking about earlier, you don't train as a team, you train as a club. So you get the whole age group together, right? More importantly, are your older athletes investing in the younger ones? Because that's where the magic is. Because they teach them, this is our culture, this is how we do things at 17. You're 12, you're now part of it. And when I'm gone, I need you to carry on the legacy. I'm planting a tree that I'll never see, but I'm hoping you provide the shade. Right? Train to win. Remember, we said that's an expectation. So you have to practice under pressure with your athletes. You have to put them in pressure situations because that's how the games are going to be. But let's alter something just a little bit. The All Blacks were doing this and they were screaming at it militaristically. And they realized it wasn't working. They were going like this in practice, and in state-dependent learning meant that when they got into games, they were like this. So they threw every scenario they could at them, and they tested them in every way they could. And they showed them things that they may never see in game situations. But then instead of screaming at them, they asked questions. What's happening? What's it look like? What would you do here? Why? What would the outcome be? Let's try it. When an athlete makes a mistake, instead of saying, you did it wrong, use your left hand, are we telling them what happened? What would you do differently? How would that affect it? Try it again. That's the important conversations that we have with our athletes when we start developing this practice under pressure. Let me give you an example. Flight simulators. My sons are in Civil Air Patrol. They get to fly planes now. They've also gotten to use simulators. These things are valuable. They show pilots things we hope they never see. But recently, there was that nasty storm that came through a couple months back, right? I was flying into Washington, D.C. during that storm. They didn't tell us when we were in the air. They only told us right before we landed. And the way they told us was, seatbelts on, please. That's all we got. The 20-minute descent that you usually take that's nice and soft and pillowy was a roller coaster. We were bouncing so hard, the woman next to me starts vomiting about 5 minutes in, and we're all handing bags to her. And she's screaming, oh, I can't take this, I can't make it, oh, please. Like screaming. She couldn't help herself. It was that bad. It was that bad. My wife sends me an article the next morning, because I tell her about it, of another plane where the pilot called in the controls tower in Dulles and said, my entire flight is sick. We shouldn't have landed in this. It was that bad. So we're coming down out of the clouds finally. We can see land, and I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness. No, that's the worst part, because now I'm afraid we're going to be bounced into the land, because as we're coming down over the houses or whatever and everything else, I can see the ground, and the plane's going like this the whole way in. I'm watching the ground go closer, faster, further, wider. It's like, what in the world is going on? Sky, ground. Lays it down, and the guy 2 rows in front of me says, did we land? I didn't even feel it. Like a hot knife through butter. I get off the plane, I look at the pilot, and I said, yeah. Gave her a fist bump and said, thank you. Going to the airport later, I hear her tell her co-pilot. She goes, that one bump we hit was so hard, I about bounced up out of my seat and onto you. Do you know why she was able to land that plane? She practiced under pressure. She'd done it in flight simulators. Is a flight simulator different from real life? Yes, but not to the brain. So instead of going like this, she stayed like this because of the training under pressure. Are we putting our athletes in situations where they're challenged mentally and physically, and yet keeping them like this? Whether they fail or succeed in that challenge in practice, it's going to keep them like this in games. Know thyself. This is all about being authentic. Teach your athletes to show up, be real, be who they are. And as coaches, we need to show up, be real, be who we are. We don't have all the answers. I wish we did, but we don't. And I don't have a magic wand. I thought for years I would figure it out one day, and I would have it. I don't have a magic wand, even after 20-some years of coaching, where I can just go like, boop, and you're a great player. Boop, and I can't, right? So I show up and I tell them. And it's hard to say when a kid says, Coach, what about this? And you go, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. Or my favorite one, I did it one day on total accident, and it was the greatest thing I ever did. Told my kids I was having a bad day. A really bad day, and I needed them more than anything. But I'm sorry if I'm a jerk tonight, or if I seem a little off. And they all go, 12 years old, it's okay, Coach. We have those days too. They're so forgiving and accepting. And then guess what? They begin to talk to each other that way. And then I read an article a couple years later that that's what the New Zealand All Blacks do. I'm like, well, they've won 70% of their matches in 114 years, so they're on to something. It is okay to be real with your kids and be honest. It is okay to show up and be who you are, because it builds trust with them. It builds connection. And when you have connection, you can transform athletes. And more importantly, they can transform each other. Leaders are learners. Create a learning environment. Remember, I don't know. Let's find the answer out together. There's nothing better than asking your athletes to find out answers, to be learners. We don't have all the answers, and we shouldn't give them all the answers. That's what we call the joystick coaching. The soccer coaches who go,
Mikey, play it to Johnny. Johnny, use your left foot. Play it pass to Michael again. Michael to Kenny. Kenny, go! And they go, I'm the best coach ever. You did this. You might as well play PlayStation. Sit down. Let them play. Let them learn. Let them figure it out on their own. And then ask them later, what happened? How'd it go? What'd you do? Because, see, game time is their time. And how I know this is because the All Blacks, what they do is they play on Saturdays, and on Sunday, it's run by the staff. This is what happened. This is where we're headed. This is what training's going to be this week. And then on Monday, the captains run training. And on Tuesday, group leaders run training. And you get the drift. By Friday, the coaches are barely doing anything, and the team's running itself. And the England rugby coach says, Saturday's my favorite day because that means they work and I get to relax. Game day is for them. You prepared them for the test. You can't stand over them in math class and go, nope, carry the one, carry the one. Oh, gosh, you didn't carry the one. Susie, get in there for him. You can't do that. But that's what we do on game day. I did it all the time, man. I would stand right at the midline, and I'd be like, pass here, go here, go here, go here. And then I discovered that my heart rate was much better when I just sit during games and take notes. And then when I had meaningful conversations, it's when they were next to me, and I could put my arm around them. Well, you can't anymore, but I could sit next to them, and I go, what do you think happened? Yeah? What would you do differently next time? Oh, that's a great, try it. Yeah, well, I'm going to put you back in. I want you to try that. And again, I made all the mistakes. I just learned this from other people and stole it. Like, oh, I like that. I'm going to steal that. Sacrifice. How are we doing on time? Oh, I'm almost there. Sorry. Sacrifice. We already talked about it. Steph Curry, right? Sacrificing for the greater good. Find something you would die for and give your life to it. Yeah, a little heavy, right? But for kids, it's find something you love and give yourself to it wholeheartedly. Everything you have for that. Embrace expectations. The Maori say, aim for the highest cloud, because if you miss, you land on the highest mountain. Remember I said, let your kids dream. They have to embrace those expectations. If they're going to have those big dreams, they have to embrace the process to get there, and
They have to own the work that it takes to get there. My daughter may not have wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, but when she graduated, she wanted to take a year off because we'd moved to San Diego, and she's like, I'm taking a year off, right? We said, okay, great. Our gift to her, instead of an umbrella or alarm clock or whatever else you give to a new grad from high school, right, because I got those, socks, right, is we gave her her insurance licenses. My wife is in insurance, so my wife and I paid for the courses and paid for her to sit for the test, and she passed them first try. Why? Because she said, I learned how to work hard for something I wanted. Oh, growth mindset, atta girl. She's now in insurance, and she sits down with me the other day and goes, Dad, I'm working with her whole office. She goes, I got big dreams, Dad. I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to take this and this because it's going to help with this, and then I'm going to do this because it's going to help me with this, and I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do. I want to travel the world and see the world and work remote. I said, let's make steps to do it. But she's willing to have these big dreams, and I'm willing to say, that's a scary thing, and you're the one that's going to have to tell your mother, but let's make a game plan, and at least it won't be as scary. She goes, Dad, I love her. Dad, I can't climb this mountain without knowing the path. Love her. Invent a language. You ever been around that group of people that, oh, inside joke, sorry. Oh, and you're like, I can't even eat lunch with these people. I have no idea what they're talking about. That's a culture. Miami, Ohio, Miami hockey. I've yet to talk about them, which is usually unusual for me because I love them. I was there for years and years. My mom claims that she was pregnant with me in Goggin Arena, so I grew up on hockey. I was before I was born on hockey at Miami. Rico, one of the things he does with his brotherhood is he brings in a recruit at the beginning of the weekend, and they spend the whole weekend with him, and at the end of the weekend, they all vote on whether that recruit belongs to the culture. Because remember what the All Blacks said, right? No jerks. You may be the best player in the world, but if you don't fit our culture, you don't belong. Well, they also have this language. They all sit around and talk, and you're like, what are they talking about? When I was at Soccer Shots years ago, we said to be genuinely happy, we had to show our kids by giving high fives and fist bumps to every kid we saw. We'd walk through school in these orange jerseys, and they'd all be like, Soccer Shots guy! We were heroes, right? Some of them weren't even in our classes, and we're like, fist bump, all right, high five, all right. And we're like, you're not even in my class, but I love you anyway, right? Well, it's really tough to walk around and get people to do that all the time. Like, oh, you didn't give high fives at the school. I saw 5 kids you missed, so I'm docking your pay. So what we did is we created a mantra, just like the All Blacks. These are all their mantras. We said high fives change lives. That kid may not be in my class, but that kid may be having a day or a week or month or year, and that high five may be the one thing that tethers him to this world in a way that allows him to get through it. And that's what matters. High fives change lives. And when we say it around people who weren't part of our organization, they'd go, huh? You're weird. But we knew the language. Don't be afraid to invent a language with your kids. To have your teams talking about things that nobody else knows, but they know because it builds connection. They're part of something bigger than themselves. They're part of something special. They feel like they belong. Everybody wants to belong to the exclusive club. And you can create it by being intentional about the culture and giving them things to talk about that keep them tethered to that culture and remind them. They say, sing your world into existence. Finally, pass the ball. I'll change it to pass the puck, don't worry. The All Blacks believe in commander's intent. As a coach, we worked all week on this. So our one intent for this game is to be this. It's taken from the military. The one intent for the outcome of this battle is this. A perfect battle would give me this outcome at the end. That's what I'm looking for. And it could be something like, I want you to string together 7 passes without a mistake. Whatever it is, something process-oriented. But when they start playing, you can't pass the puck for them. You need to pass them the puck and then let them do their thing. Just like the head of a military group can't get out there and do the work for everybody else. He or she has to hope that they make the right decisions based on the commander's intent and the training they've given them. You trained them to do this, so now you pass the puck to them and you let them be leaders. What does it look like? Glad you asked. Leaders create leaders. That's what it looks like. Will you bear with me for 3 more minutes and I'll tell this quick story? That's the greatest team I ever coached. Greatest team I ever coached. Why? Because at the very beginning of my tenure with them, they said, we want power. I said, you mean influence? They said, yeah, that geeky word you use because you're weird. I'm weird. So they wanted influence. I said, here's how we get it. It first started that I let them choose the values of the team, and I guided the process. Then at practices, I would give them what's called limited choices. Do you want to play this game or this game? So I still controlled it. And then one day they said, we want to own halftime, coach. And I said, whoa, hold your horses there. But I did it. I relented to a group of 12-year-old boys because they were that confident. So I let them run halftime. We'd come to halftime. I'd done it with high school and college kids, right? They're 12. How bad can it be? Come to halftime, and I'd say, you got 2 minutes. What you really loved about the first half and what you want to try differently. No negative. What you want to try differently, second half, I'll be back. In the beginning, I'd come over with my clipboard and I'd write on it, and I'd come over and they'd go, well, this and this, coach, and I'd be like, no. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, right? By the end of the season, they're doing this, and I'm coming over and I'm going, what do you have? And like, this and this, coach, and I'm like, me too. Wait, what did you have, coach? They saw things I didn't see. They were doing things I didn't expect of them. They saw the game from a completely different point of view, which is why Steve Kerr lets his guys run timeouts sometimes, because they're the ones in the action. They see things differently. They were running halftime, running games. And they said to me, because they had younger sisters and friends that were 8, and I was coaching a U8 girls team, why don't you let your U8 girls try it? I'm that naive, I did. I had a dad come up to me midway through season and say, I don't know what you did with my daughter, but every morning at 5 a.m., because that's when the English Premier League's on, she's up watching games with me, so she's ready for the game on Sunday. Because we had rotating captains at that age, right? It's just like, you and you are captains today, right? Worse, I'm sitting at a game, playground about 30 yards behind us, game going on. I'm standing up, not coaching anymore, but standing I can't sit, so I'm standing at the sideline, talking with the other coach or something, and it falls deathly silent behind me. 8-year-old girls, playground of 30 yards away, deathly silent. Panic mode sets in. How many of those parents are sitting over there going, coach, lost total control, all the girls are over on the playground. I turn around, nope, they're all on the bench. I sit down with them, I go, ladies, what gives? Shh. Halftime. They were watching the game, so they had valuable input at halftime. 8 years old. They didn't understand any of the psychology behind it, but what they got is they owned the process. It was theirs. It was them talking at halftime, and if they watched and paid attention, they could learn from it and have something valuable to put in. Kids want significance. Kids want to be valued, and kids want to know that they have influence. And leaders creating leaders does that. All because I was dumb enough or lazy enough or whatever to allow a group of 12-year-old boys to say, we want power, coach. You can do that too. All you need to do is pass the puck. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes. All progress hinges on the gap between those who will talk in private and those who will act in public. I gave you 15 things the All Blacks use. I gave you the 5 psychological constructs that show a difference between a warrior, not winner. I have copies of this in PDF. I'm happy to share them. I have no problem. Video credit goes to Dove for the video, right? So that I'll get that out of the way. All I ask of you is, I talked a lot today, right? We go away and we get that hangover 3 days later after a conference where we go, oh, man, what was it I wanted to do? I wrote notes. Oh. I'm asking you, it doesn't have to be me. It can be the goalie workshop, it can be the chaos workshop, it can be any one of the speakers. It can be the workshop on how to be a leader from George. Whatever it is, take one thing from this weekend and do it tomorrow. Because you're part of something bigger than yourselves. Because everybody I've talked to, I've asked them to do that, which means thousands and thousands of coaches are doing just one thing differently and acting in public. And that's how we change everything. That's how we create warriors and not winners.